friends, welcome to the special lecture Symbolic Expression, and in the studio we have Manisha Sharma with us as a sign language expert, and today we'll talk about the alternative Hindi cinema from 1970s to 2020s. In the earlier lectures on the alternative Hindi cinema, we talked about the cinema of the colonial period, the post-colonial period just after independence, and how cinema from the 1960s and 70s and thereafter in the 80s as well, we find that some of the filmmakers like Shyam Benegal as well as Mani Kaul, Kumar Sahani, Govind Nihalani, all of them, they made their own contribution in that sense in the framework of the films which were made by them, which were concerning some of the important concerns of the society in those times. We also talked about some of the films by these filmmakers, whether Junoon, Mandi, Mammo, Sardari Begum, Zubaida, etc. And how during the times of partition also we see that some of the films which were made, which were conveying the tragedy of partition, whether this film, one of the films was Lahore, which was made in 1949, so which was some kind of a rare film on partition, because after that we don't find many films on partition as late as 1973 when Garam Hawa was made, and thereafter in 1987 when Tamas was being made. We also see that these filmmakers, one of them was Ketan Mehta. He made a film called Mirch Masala in 1987, which was set in the colonial India in 1940s. And this film was talking about the greed and lechery of the officials and how the Subedar, who was the local tax collector, played by Nasiruddin Shah, he exploits his power and he did not have any concern for women and their rights. And the film was also trying to convey the subservient position of the women in the society and how women, they were being objectified in the society as well as it was being done by the Subedar in this particular film as well, and how when the women, they come out collectively, then they were able to realize their own power. So this film was trying to convey the concerns of the women of those times and how the women emancipation, as has been talked about, it should also lead to the women empowerment. Then only we will find that women, they will be able to come out of the shackles of the kind of treatment which has been given to them over generation in a patriarchal kind of a society. So another film by Ketan Mehta was Hero Hira Lal in 1988, about an auto rickshaw driver who falls in love with a film actress. And this film was trying to glorify suicide and how suicide basically became some sort of a spectacle. So the way death was being treated in this film and how the commercialization of everything and the advertising as a norm was also seen to be there in this particular film. Because we find that 1980s was also a period when how things, they got commercialized, and in the 1990s this kind of a thing moved further when we find the globalization, liberalization and the privatization of the economy. So we find that this focus on the advertising and commercialization of the death was being shown in this particular film, and death basically became some sort of a spectacle in this particular film. We also find that Ketan Mehta also made a film called Maya Meep Saab in 1993, which was based on Gustave Flaubert's novel Madame Bovary. And in this film, Maya, played by Deepa Sahi, is alone to ponder her own fate, and she has affairs with men, and Maya is not satisfied as she longs for more bodily needs, and it is perhaps this that leads to her sudden death. So this idea of the kind of heroine, Maya again itself is signifying the question of materialism. So this was shown in this particular kind of film, which was again a film of the alternative or alternative cinema. Then we also see a film which was some kind of biographical, which was based on the life of Mangal Pandey, and this film basically was also trying to convey whether the first war of Indian independence or it was a Sepoy mutiny, because it was concerned with the revolt of 1857. So film basically is a study in imperialism, in that sense that how some of the political parties, they demanded a ban on accusing it of showing some kind of a falsehood and indulging in character assassination of Mangal Pandey. That how the film shows that Mangal Pandey is visiting the house of a prostitute. So we also find that this film was trying to convey the role of Mangal Pandey in the 1857 rebellion, because he was seen to be one person who in a way initiated the rebellion, in that sense that his rising of with regard to the kind of issue of greased cartridges which was there with regard to the situation in the 1857. And we find that how the narrator describes the progress of the national movement over the next century, and the montage in the film ends with the documentary footage where the Gandhi is leading the Congress during the peaceful protest against the British rule in 1940s, forcing an end of colonialism. So we find that this particular film, in which Amir Khan played the role of Mangal Pandey, definitely was very important, in the sense that not many films on the revolt of 1857 have been made. One of them we talked about in the earlier lecture was Junoon, which was made by Sham Benegal, and Jhansi Ki Rani again was a film which was made by Sohrab Modi in 1950s. And thereafter one of the films recently with the title of Manikarnika, again on 1857 revolt, was made, so which was again based on the life of the Jhansi Ki Rani Lakshmibai. So all these kinds of films, all of them, they were trying to communicate the historical events of those times in some kind of a fictionalized narrative, but they were trying to convey the kind of a reality of those times. There was another film called Rangrasiya by Ketan Mehta, which was adaptation of a Marathi writer Ranjit Desai's biographical novel Raja Ravi Verma, and it was based on the life of the 19th century Indian painter Raja Ravi Verma. It had some kind of censorship troubles which were there, and this film was though made in 2008 but could not be released in India due to the nudity issues. Then we also see that some of the filmmakers like Saeed Mirza, where we find that Arvind Desai ki Ajeeb Dastan in 1978, Albert Pinto Gussa Kyun Aata in 1980, Mohan Joshi Hazero in 1984, and Salim Langde Pe Matro in 1989 have been some of the important films which were made by Saeed Mirza. Then we also talk about filmmakers like Rishikesh Mukherjee, who was an editor with the Bimal Roy, and how he popularized the middle cinema, which was again within the confines of the mainstream cinema, but at the same time it was seen to be an alternative cinema because it was the middle cinema in that sense, and how it was also trying to reflect the changing middle class ethos of those times. We find that how Mukherjee carved a middle path between the extravagance of the mainstream cinema and the stark realism of the art cinema. Many of the films which were made by, as you can see on the screen as well, Rishikesh Mukherjee made many of these films. All these films rather, he was the director of all these films. Ashirwad to begin with in 1968, and Satyakam in 1969, Guddi. Then we also find Anand, Bawarchi, Namak Haram, Mili, Chupke Chupke, Golmaal, Khoobsurat. So all these films they were made by Rishikesh Mukherjee, and we find that the kind of middle cinema which he was propagating, he was able to do justice with it. And we also find that in many of the films which he made, we do not even find many of the established actors of those times, and how we find that Amol Palekar became who had the kind of looks which he had, that he was a very ordinary kind of looks and very ordinary kind of a middle class appearance, and the way he acted in many of the films made by Rishikesh Mukherjee, and all these films, they were very popular in those times as well. Then we also find that with the established actors as well, when he made those films, the kind of presentation which happens in those films, that in Bawarchi, Rajesh Khanna was being shown as a Bawarchi or a household help. So this kind of a portrayal of reality in his films, many a times we find that, especially in Anand and Guddi, the idea of death which is being shown in both these films, and how in a very realistic kind of a situation he was able to do justice with the idea of death, which was considered to be the ultimate reality. Then we also find that other filmmakers like Basu Chatterjee, he built his plots on the middle class lives as well, and the kind of films which he made, Piya Ka Ghar in 1972, with Anil Dhawan and Jaya Bhaduri. Rajanikanth in 1974 again was a realistic outlook on cinema, and how the realism as some kind of a whether as a movement or in the framework of the reality was very important in the framework of the arts, especially cinema. Thereafter, Ek Ruka Hua Faisla in 1986, which was made by him, was again trying to convey the concerns of those times, that how the people, those who were shown to be the members of the jury, they were not concerned with that important kind of an event which had happened in someone's life. Rather, they were more concerned about their own personal issues, their own stereotypes, their own personal standing within the society, or their own problems with which they were trying to see that particular event or that murder within some kind of a lens which was colored with their own prejudices. So this film again was an important film from that point of view, that it was only shot within a room and only discussion was part of that, and so it was trying to convey a kind of a reality. We also find that there were other important filmmakers, with Adur Gopalakrishnan through his first film Swayamvaram in 1972, and the way he extended the new wave cinema to the Malayalam cinema, and G. Arvindan through his first film Uttarayanam in 1974 strengthened this movement. Then we also find filmmakers like B.V. Karant, Girish Karnad and Girish Karasavalli spearheading the Kannada cinema movement. Then we also see that filmmakers like Girish Karasavalli, he graduated from FTII Ghat Shraddha, which was made by him 1977, which also won the National Award for the best film as well. In Assamese, we find Janu Barua, who made his first film Aparupa, which was in 1982. Then his another film, basically, which was made in 1987, which was Halodiya Choraye Baodhan Kali, which was again dealing with the issues of the social problems of the rural Assam. So these were the important filmmakers within the regional cinema. And then we also find that if we say that how the alternative cinema was on some kind of a decline, then the rising costs which were involved in the film production was one of the factors. And then we also find that how the commercialization of the films, they had some kind of a negative impact on the art films of those times, because we find that not many people they were ready to go to cinema halls to watch films, art films that way, because films they had been commercialized that way. Then we also find that how the investment returns, risks were also involved in that sense, and because of which the art films became less popular, because the investors, they were not very sure whether they will be able to recover the kind of money which has been invested by them. And then we find the underworld financing was another big concern, where the political and the economic turmoil could also be seen. We also see during this time that how the VCR system came, and the television and the piracy kind of concerns within the concern of the VCR could also be seen in at that point of time. So piracy as a concern has also been an important concern in today's world as well, where we find that so many new developments in the technology have taken place, and piracy has become more rampant in that sense, and it is causing a lot of loss to the filmmakers as well. Then we also see that the kind of alternative exhibition system could not be developed for the art house circuit, so that was one of the factors which led to the decline of alternative cinema in some sense, if we try to see it. But at the same time, we have to also see that how the alternative cinema made some kind of a resurgence, and we don't have to see that it declined in a certain manner. Rather, we have to see that how it transformed itself, because all the times we find that time is a factor which is always changing. And in that sense, if the changes came in 1990s in the framework of the liberalization, globalization and privatization, then we also see that new kind of ideas also came, because of which we find that alternative cinema also changed itself. and we find its resurgence in many of the offbeat films, because film as a medium also had to recover money which was being invested by the filmmakers. So they just could not make films which will not be watched by the audience, because making the films for the audience is one of the important concerns of the filmmakers, and all filmmakers definitely they want that their films they reach a wider audience. So we find that there was some kind of an experimentation in these times, and new themes they were being in a way taken from different sources, and films they were being made on them, and films they were within the budgets as well. They were in a way slick productions, and they were focusing on the story, script and the screenplay, all of them. And we also see that the coming of the multiplexes in these times also definitely played an important role, because the small budget films basically targeting a particular kind of an audience, they could be made during this time, because these films they could be exhibited in the smaller theaters which were in the multiplexes that way. Then we also see that some of the directors they made certain films which were within the framework of some kind of an experimental cinema with their new themes. Mani Ratnam's Viva, for example, or Nagesh Kukunoor's Door in 2006. Then Manish Jha's Matrubhumi again in 2004, dealing with the issue of the diminishing rate of women in the framework of the kind of sex ratio which is there in the society. Or Sudhir Mishra's Hazaron Khwahishein Aisi, again with a different kind of treatment, dealing with the movement of the kind of movement in the Naxalbari movement of the 1970s. Then Janu Barua's Maine Gandhi Ko Nahi Mara. Then Onir's My Brother Nikhil again in 2005, where we find that the film had a different kind of a treatment. And then Anurag Kashyap's Black Friday in 2007, which was again banned for some time because of the kind of portrayal which was there in the film. Then Vikramaditya Motwani's Udaan in 2009 again was in a way trying to convey the concerns of the youth. Then there were other filmmakers. We find Satya by Ram Gopal Verma, which was some sort of a crime film of the Bombay Noir. Then A Wednesday by Neeraj Pandey. Devdi by Anurag Kashyap, Life in a Metro by Anurag Basu, Gangs of Wasipur by Anurag Kashyap again, Kahani by Sujoy Ghosh, Special 26 by Neeraj Pandey. So we find that all these films which were made by the filmmakers, those who had their own ideas with these new kinds of themes, and the kind of treatment which they gave to these films, because Devdi was a kind of a take on Devdas, which was made several times beginning from 1935 that this film was made. We find that in Bengali and Hindi, P.C. Barua made this film. Then again in 1955 Bimal Roy made Devdas, and again in 2000 we find Sanjay Leela Bhansali made the film Devdas. So it was some kind of a take on the way the film will unfold in today's times. Then again Kahani again was with a different kind of a treatment, and Special 26 was based on the newspaper reportings that how people from the income tax department, those who were the fake people, they were posing to be the people from the income tax department, they were conducting raids, and it was being reported in several newspapers. And Satya definitely was a film which was dealing with the kind of a crime film or the gangster film, and it became so popular in 1998 that many of the films which were made by Ram Gopal Verma during that period, they related to such kind of a theme. Then again, A Wednesday was dealing with the concerns of terrorism in today's time and how terrorism has been an important concern in. Then we also find in the later times Piku by Shujit Sarkar, Pink by Nriddha Roy Chaudhary, Toilet Ek Prem Katha by Shri Narayan Singh, Padman by R. Balki, Badhai Ho by Ms. Sharma, then Badla by Sujoy Ghosh, Badhai Do by Harshvardhan Kulkarni in 2022. So all these kinds of films, they were being with a different kind of a treatment. They were coming with new stories. They were not run-of-the-mills stories which had been shown earlier. Rather, these stories, they were being taken from the kind of concerns of the recent times, though they were more within the framework of the mainstream cinema, but at the same time their treatment and the characterization was such that especially films like Badhai Do or Badhai Ho or Pink or Piku for that matter, all of them, they were trying to convey some kind of a reality of today's times. So when we talk about such kind of a cinema, then we definitely find that these new filmmakers, they are not only trying to take directly something from the older films, but rather they are trying to create some kind of a new thing from the new concerns which were there in the society. For example, Toilet Ek Prem Katha talks about the issue of sanitation which is there, and which has also been taken up by the government of India, that how these kinds of things, they should be in every section of society, in every household we should have a toilet within the urban or the rural sector. So when these films, they become popular, how the audience is able to receive them, and at the same time they are also able to understand the kind of concerns which are there, that it is not only an issue of sanitation, but at the same time it is also an issue which is concerned with crime as well. So and largely we see that these kinds of concerns are more important from the point of view of women. And then again a popular film called Padman, the way it has been presented by R. Balki, which is a new kind of a story, and it is also reflective of the concerns of India, in that sense, that how again women, they are the ones who will be beneficiaries of such kind of attempts by the innovators in different fields. So we find again, for example, when we talk about Badhai Do, so it is talking about the kinds of concerns of the people, those who are seen to be in a way marginalized in the society. So we find that such kind of portrayals, they have been very, very impressive in that sense. And when we try to see the cinema from 1940s, 50s, when we try to in a way analyze that how the concerns of those times, the way they were being exhibited by the filmmakers of those times, as we talked in the earlier lectures, like Shantaram and Abbas and Bimal Roy, and thereafter in 50s and 60s, Satyajit Ray, Ritvik Ghatak and Mrinal Sen, how they tried to show the contemporary reality, and thereafter Shyam Benegal, Govindan Nilani, Ketan Mehta, etc. in 1970s, 80s and 90s, how these filmmakers, they were also trying to deal with the kind of a reality. So we will be able to understand the alternative cinema, art cinema or the parallel cinema in this particular concern, and how all these filmmakers, they have contributed in their own way to the development of the alternative cinema in this way. So with this, I'd like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.